Hello everybody and welcome to another EAW webinar. I am coming to you today live from Franklin, Massachusetts, the home of EAW, the headquarters of EAW and our new video production studios here. Very excited about that. I'm going to take this opportunity to let you know that I am also going to compose a blog that is going to be a companion to this presentation today. You can find that on the EAW website. Today's topic is conquering noise abatement, and this is going to be a pretty heady topic here. We're going to be here for a little while today. This is going to take a little bit to get through this. I got a lot of information to cover. So I say we just get right to it and get on with the show, as they speak. All right. So if we go here, get this going here. Let's talk about what today's webinar is not going to be today. It is not going to be a discussion of different measurement systems and how they work. All right, we don't really want to dive into that. That's not going to be the topic of the day. We're not going to ever discuss whether noise abatement is warranted. It's irrelevant to the discussion today. We just want to come up with the best tools to conquer this and battle it, because it's a real challenge out in the world. Noise abatement is, I think it gets stronger every year and has been going on for decades. And this happens around the world where we have such powerful systems now, but they can be neutered a little bit by having to keep noise levels down surrounding the venue, especially so for open air situations. Okay, so we're going to talk about some good tools to help combat some of that challenge. And we are certainly not going to talk about, how to fool or trick noise measurement systems. This is not at the source of it at all today. Okay, what we are going to talk about today is how adaptive technologies can help you better address noise abatement. We're going to look at it almost purely through the lens of adaptive and its capabilities, and we're going to do some comparatives, some side-by-side comparatives to the capabilities of adaptive versus conventional line arrays. Okay, as I've said before, and if you've been to my presentations, you've heard me say this in the past, we're all line arrays. Some of us are just more line array than others. Okay, so we're going to definitely talk into that today. All right, so just a couple really brief, just high-level looks at what we are challenged with here. High mid-band measurement, almost all venues are going to do some sort of A-weighted measurement, whether it's at the mix position and then extrapolated out over distance, or it's at the mix position, a property line, and within the residential areas or the commercial areas in and of itself. So, all of that is going to be an A-weighted measurement to some degree in some place. Oftentimes it's an LEQ style measurement where you have timed averages. You have to be under a certain SPL over a given period of time. There is, of course, always a low frequency measurement as well, a C-weighted measurement. Again, that can be at property lines, additional measurement stations, etc. Obviously, with the power and the capability of PA systems today, C-weighted measurements are a challenge. I mean, this subwoofer information can go on for a long, long time and make great distance outside the venue. So we have to learn ways to cover it. All right, so let's just talk about what the fundamental challenge is here. I mean, just restate it just so that we're all clear on it. The challenge really is, how do I ensure the paying audience can enjoy the show at an appropriate volume and at the same time adhere to local regulations and statutes? Those are two things that can be diametrically opposed to each other. So we have to find out ways to manage that and put on the best shows for the promoters, the people, everybody involved. We want to do really, really good comprehensive shows because the PA systems have the capability. All right, so let's take a look at the conventional toolkit. That's what I call this. These are the tools that we have at our disposal today with conventional line array. Now, by conventional line array, I'm talking about line arrays that integrate a horn or a horn and a waveguide in some sort of curved fashion to be able to distribute a point and shoot methodology to their high frequency into the space. Okay, so this is what I would consider conventional toolkit compared to an adaptive toolkit. Obviously, long line lengths are going to result in better directivity, especially at low frequency. And this is true for both conventional arrays and adaptive arrays. You can't escape that math. The longer the line, the better and lower frequency control you're going to have. The positive of that is that when we get that directivity in place, it reduces the off-axis lobing. It keeps audio going where we want it to go and not drifting into areas where we don't want it to go, which is a central issue in noise abatement challenges. One of the negatives to that concept, obviously, is sometimes convincing the promoter or the building owner that what you need is more PA to keep it quieter somewhere else. It's a tough sell. That is a tough sell. You have to drag them into the science a little bit to get them to understand that. So, that can be a tough sell to anybody. Cardioid and hypercardioid capability for given pass bands, and I mean that for high and mid bands. Well, it can significantly reduce the level behind the PA system. We've seen that now. There are systems out there that offer cardioid in the upper and mid and low mid bands, as well as subwoofers, obviously. But in the context of noise abatement, that's only helpful if the regulated zone is behind the system, right? And because these systems don't necessarily offer, operate as single acoustic source, as you start splitting arrays apart, et cetera, even though they have cardioid capability, they're going to create lobing somewhere. You'll hear me talk about this a couple of times today. It's like, yes, cardioid is a fantastic tool, but that audio does not just disappear, right? It gets pushed somewhere else. So unless you retain control of it, you can actually cause additional problems by simply imparting the cardioid, okay? I'm going to give you an actual example of that today, which speaks to that next negative, right? The lobes can kind of go where you don't want them to go. Prediction software allows for accurate coverage of prediction, or accurate coverage prediction. It's adequate for predicting coverage for a given geometry and a given system. The negative is conventional line source software does not necessarily account for this thing that I've been talking about over the past few webinars of directivity leakage, especially for the mid and high band. Now, some of them do, some of them do not. I encourage you to reach out to your manufacturer and see if this kind of thing is in play in their acoustic models, right? What I can tell you ahead of time, and without giving away the punchline of the presentation, that we don't have that problem of leakage in adaptive. So automatically, as a result of that, our SPL calculations are going to be pretty accurate, right? Also, the conventional arrays, once they're deployed, really do not have much in the way of any ability to adjust coverage if you would need to. And in outdoor situations, maybe it's environmental, maybe it's operational, where you are really in need of the ability to adjust coverage. So, once it's in place, there's not a whole lot you can do about it until you start incorporating some extreme DSP. And then even then, your ability to really manipulate it in any significant fashion is pretty hindered. All right, so let's talk about this idea of directivity leakage. I've brought this up a few webinars ago. I've talked about it at trade shows, et cetera, and it's generated a lot of interest. So I want to kind of revisit that here just a little bit, just to set the tone for what we're going to be talking about today, because this coverage idea is, as I say here, a dual-edged sword. Obviously, comprehensive, precise coverage of the audience geometry, that's a great thing for the listening area, right? It's a great thing for listeners. But that good coverage, that quality of control is also really good for noise abatement, right? You don't have audio leaking into other places. Conversely, if I have coverage that I have to build overshoot in order to get audio to that section of the audience, or I have leakage because of the spacing and the driver size design within the array, directivity leakage, that's a bad thing for noise abatement. That's the thing that is going to challenge your noise abatement. And I'm just going to say it here, when we're talking about noise abatement, this is a game of inches, right? This is a game of small gains. And I mean, 1, 2, 3 dB can be the difference between you being in compliance and you being out of compliance and being fined thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars for short periods of time of being out of compliance. So the details matter here, okay? Now, as we get on with this discussion, you're going to see what we're going to talk about a lot today is variance, right? The variance between a conventional array and an adaptive array. And in terms of between each other and at distance, you're going to see a lot of SPL numbers. Don't take the numbers as like literal SPL in terms of noise abatement, like, okay, well, it produces 91 dB at 1,000 feet or whatever. Throw that out of your mind. You don't really need to worry about the hard number itself. What we want is the comparative number. What is that number compared to the other style of array? And we're going to talk about that kind of delta, okay? I'll try to encourage you to stay focused like that as we go on. So let's re-examine this idea of leakage and exactly what it means. Here we have an array of 8 2-inch sources. And you can look at that collapse pattern from 2500 to 5K and think, wow, that's actually pretty good. I would think that would be all right for what we're trying to do, until you realize that that's only to 5 kilohertz, right? Once we get above 5 kilohertz, now the spacing between those drivers, even though they're stacked very close together here, that spacing has offsets in it that are going to create some flaring of its coverage pattern at 6300 and above, right? You're seeing directivity leakage there above that frequency band. And that is directly as a result of driver size and driver spacing. This is the problem that EAW solved acoustically in the beginning with adaptive, right? They went to smaller driver sizes with smaller spacing and pushed that directivity leakage up above 13 kilohertz, right? Which is a very, very powerful thing to have at your disposal when you're doing noise abatement. So if we take a look at what this actually looks like, on the bottom here you see an adaptive array and then a conventional array above it. We've just married their two responses here. So this is a look at strictly at 5 kilohertz, and you can see the difference in energy above the collapse pattern in the array. And I've kind of taken the liberty of putting that polar right back over this so you can kind of see this kind of thing happening, right? So this is at 5 kilohertz, 6.3, 8 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz. Look at the difference in energy above the collapse pattern in conventional versus adaptive array. All of this plays in SPL calculation and prediction, right? So you want to take this into account, and I'm going to be reminding you of this as we go through this. All right. Now I do want to say this up front. This is not an attempt to disparage or bag on the idea of a horn and a waveguide. The horn and a waveguide was a beautiful solution. It was kind of a hybrid solution to line array. It got us into the line array era. But when you have multiple versions of this horn and waveguide in play in an array, in the mid-range and the high frequency, it is only acting like a line source to line source criteria up to a given frequency. After that, it's multiple acoustic centers again, right? Now we have all kinds of offset in there that we're going to have to deal with. So while the waveguide actually does a beautiful job of mitigating this problem a little bit with the offset, you can see the flaring in the response there is actually much better. It still exists. It's still there, right? This hasn't been a total solution to the problem. It's just been a way to get us over the hump until we could get to a better solution, which I think adaptive is, honestly. All right, we're also going to talk a little bit about environmental impact today. Obviously, with temperature and humidity, almost all modern line array systems have the ability to input data and affect frequency response based on temperature or humidity, maybe even altitude. We can do that certainly with adaptive, and we can do it in real time and not only adjust emphasis, pre-emphasis of high frequency, but also coverage angle, et cetera, to be able to deal with these kind of things, right? So everybody's kind of in the game. Everybody understands what's at stake here. Just depending on which system you're on, how they implement temperature and humidity adjustment is varied across the board. But one that we all have to deal with that is really difficult to deal with is inversion layer. If you're not familiar with inversion layer, that tells me you probably haven't done a whole lot of outside big scale PA work, because this is a real challenge out in the world. I experience this seemingly every week now. So the idea here is that when you have warmer air underneath cooler air, which you have during the day for these large shows, you actually are creating audio that is zooming away from your coverage. It's actually bending up and dissipating a little bit. This is inversion layer with cooler air over warmer air. Now, as we get into nighttime, this process reverses, right? Where now, as the ground cools now, it's actually presenting cooler air against warmer air above it. And the warmer air kind of acts as a ceiling here and kind of traps that audio and can send it for miles. Remember, audio travels quicker, it accelerates, it travels faster, I should say, through warm air than cooler air. It has a harder time getting through cooler air by comparison to warmer air. So in this situation, the warm air over cooler is acting kind of like a waveguide, and it can just travel for miles like this. So, I'll give you some examples of how we're going to deal with that with adaptive technology today. But you should know that it exists, and it may answer some questions for you when you're out in these large events on a hot day, like why isn't my audio making it to the back of my coverage even though my coverage says it's going there, right? All right, so we're going to start with just our first case study here. We're going to have a number of case studies here. I think I've got 3 venues and 3 real venues and 1 virtual one here. I've just built a virtual kind of flat ground festival here just to kind of showcase what we're going to kind of do as we go through some of these other places. In this situation, we're going to look at 16 conventional boxes versus 10 adaptive boxes, and we're going to compare them left and right. We're going to put 1 PA on one side, 1 PA on the other. This is, like I said, this is a long flat ground. There are no delay systems involved here. We're just going to look at the capabilities of these 2 arrays in terms of what they can do. So here's just some rough metrics for you on it. From start of coverage to the neighborhood, the fake neighborhood that we've built is about 1,000 feet. The ground itself that we need to cover is about 325 feet, so roughly a football field, maybe just a shade more, etc. Right? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to compare these 2 arrays and what they can do here. So we have the adaptive array on top, the conventional array on bottom, and you can kind of see we've built coverage for both of them to go to the end of the field, and this is kind of what's happening here, right? Look at the adaptive array. We have only a 2 dB variance front to back, even at that distance there. It's doing a really good job of covering that space, whereas in the conventional array, we have about a 7 dB negative delta. Now, this idea of negative and positive delta, if you're not familiar with this concept, I'm going to kind of bring some clarity to it with the white text. It's going to tell you whether lower numbers are better or higher numbers are better if you haven't really grasped it. So obviously, in terms of purity of coverage or conciseness of coverage, lower numbers are going to be better here. So we got a pretty good range of SPL in the conventional array. But all the way out at distance, we have a pretty big positive delta between the 2 systems, but it actually ends up kind of the same in the neighborhood. And this is where it demands that you dig in a little bit past the numbers to understand what is likely to happen here, right? Because even though these are coming out equal here, on this show day, excuse me, when you're using the conventional array, your SE, your systems engineer, et cetera, is probably going to work that system. He's probably going to incorporate some DSP maybe, some gain shading, et cetera, to try to level out that system across those grounds. And as he does that, that neighborhood number is going to rise, right? So all things being equal, those 2 numbers are very different in the neighborhood. But right from the get-go, you can see that adaptive gives you a big advantage here because it covers the space without hardly any work in terms of SPL coverage. So this is kind of the concept that we're going to have going forward here. We're going to do these kind of delta checks between the adaptive topology and the conventional topology, okay? All right, so let's start with Forest Hill Stadium in New York. Now, luckily for me, giving this presentation, I was actually able to find the original resolution files that I used for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers when we did these tours in 2014 and 2017, and I've used these as an example. These were very difficult venues to do with regard to noise abatement, but we handled it really, really well with adaptive. We had a lot of people asking, hey man, how the heck are you doing that with this system? So I'm going to give you some insight to it here. These are the actual resolution files from that tour. All right, so let's talk about Forest Hills and the challenge here. Obviously, if you have not been there, this is a tennis stadium. It's where tennis was, the US Open was held for years. And it's a horseshoe-style stadium. It has very intense proximity effect here, or proximity challenge here, meaning neighborhoods are really close to the venue. The running kind of storyline of this is the monitor engineer stage left can turn around and look into someone's window. That's how close they are to the stadium. And that's not an exaggeration. That actually is the way it works. So obviously you have to be very careful here. There's really densely populated residences on axis of the PA system. There is additional regulation behind it. It's a little bit of a distance because of all those practice courts back there, but you do have that regulation there. You're going to see broadband A and C regulations for the close proximity to the venue. And of course, if that wasn't challenging enough, you have the additional challenge of it's a pretty low ceiling height, a pretty low roof height, at the venue. Maybe they do this on purpose, I don't know, but it's going to restrict your trim height, and you're not going to be able to put in a very long line here. So it's going to restrict trim height, which means you're going to have a very steep coverage need. You're going to have a low hanging array and point it up. And that's not really a great fit for conventional arrays. You know, long line arrays are impractical here, almost impossible to get in place. So really, the whole name of the game here is precise vertical directivity. That's what you got to have here. Try to keep all the audio in the horseshoe and not let it out to the neighborhood. All right, so let's take a look at our conventional array first. So you can see conventional, because of its trim height, etc., is already having the issue of getting constant coverage or consistent coverage to the back seat. What you're seeing here are predicted SPLs behind the stage, at the mix position, at the backs, at the last seat, and then out into the middle of the neighborhood. Okay, so you can grab those numbers here. We'll have a side-by-side comparison coming up here. For adaptive, we see a very different story here. Adaptive can very easily cover this, and I will make note of it that it is with less cabinetry. So you are with, what have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 conventional boxes and 6 adaptive boxes here. And look how well it's covering that geometry. Same mix position level as the last seat. So the mixer is hearing the same show as the last seat, and we get good drop off down into that neighborhood and the surrounding back areas. So if we, and I think this is my own hypothesis in this, but I got some data to back it up here. And I think this part of the problem that the conventional array here is having is leakage and overshoot, right? If they've got to tip it way back and shoot it up to get it up these steep things, they're going to have overshoot in play, and they're probably going to have some leakage in play here as well. So if you just take a look at, you know, 1 octave at 10 kilohertz here, it kind of tells the story here, right? We have a very big difference from mix position to back seat in terms of high frequency coverage. If we take a look at adaptive, we have almost no difference in that coverage, right? The same high frequency balance and content that you're hearing at the front of house position is going to be present at the back seat. So if we take a look at that side by side, and I'm going to volume match these two things. I'm going to make the adjustment in terms of their numbers just to kind of compare apples to apples here. You can see what's happening here, right? The adaptive array is doing a much better job, a much more comprehensive job of covering the space, yet it is quieter in the neighborhood on both sides, on axis side and off axis side, right? So you have a show that is overall louder for the audience, but yet quieter in the neighborhood itself, especially at high frequency here. If we look at it in broadband A, where we're seeing full frequency, same story applies here. And you can see the two curves here, right? The curves represent the mix position and the last seat in the house. Those traces nearly lay on top of each other in the adaptive and are considerably different in the conventional array, and yet we're still quieter in the neighborhood, right? So this is a big advantage. 3 dB is not an insignificant amount of delta there between those two systems. So we were able to do this when I was there with Tom Petty. I mean, promoter was, you know, shaking our hand and thanking us. He said he had never heard audio that clear and that well covered up into the top of the bowl, but yet still stayed in compliance at the venue. All right, let's just kind of recap the advantages there. So these are the adaptive advantages over conventional when doing that. The low trim height is not going to be a challenge to the coverage or the distribution. The audience coverage is not compromised by the shorter arrays. The start and stop coverage obviously is feeding that drop off into the neighborhood. More control of the PA results in better results behind it, right? That's kind of the hidden thing here. We're in an era now where, you know, kind of cardioid PA systems are going to become the minimum ante, but really the thing to note here is if you have more precise control on the front of the PA, it results in better control on the rear of the PA, right? So we kind of get that kind of organically with adaptive. All right, let's take a look at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, California, another one that I've done many times. And again, this was one that we really did a good job with adaptive in here. It's a very unique venue in many ways. So This is a traditional Greek theater. The part outlined in yellow there is traditional Greek theater design. They've added an additional lawn seating up here that you can see. So there's kind of segmented coverage here. You have a coverage within the Greek bowl, and then you have the coverage up above it. We definitely have a proximity challenge here for sure. Lots of densely populated residences and campus very nearby. Again, we suffer a little bit here from low trim height, so we're going to have a hard time getting long lines, and going to be challenged with steepness here with conventional array. Long lines are going to be really impractical here. We're not going to be able to do long line arrays here to keep the low frequency directivity in play. There is, in this area in California, again, this is in Berkeley, there's some pretty serious temperature inversion here. You have pretty warm days followed by cool nights, and that hot air can kind of come in and descend over and trap that cool air in. It just makes for audio transmission that can go for miles. So you have to have some way to actually react to this if you want. Now they've kind of built in a reaction capability to this by segmenting the lawn seat out, right? The lawn seats out. And they put delay system there to be able to control that a little bit. But I'm going to show you possibly a better way to do it and keep the audience in play, right? So let's, oops, sorry, I got to get this. All right, so here we go. We're going to look at an adaptive system. This is what adaptive would do in the building. Now, I will say the delay concept is not in play right now. We're just using the PA system to cover the entire venue, meaning both the Greek bowl and the lawn, all right? So again, you can see that adaptive does a really good job here in terms of precise start and stop. Even with this really steep coverage and low-hanging PA, we only got 2 dB of variance between the mix position and the far seat. So we get a really nice drop off out into the back areas here. Pretty nice drop off behind it as well. All right, let's take a look at the traditional array. So here you can see that we have a pretty wide variance between the mix position and the last seat, almost 10 dB. And yet we only get 12 dB of variance last seat out to the back areas here. So you get kind of the worst of both worlds there, right? You got poor coverage at the last seat and not as great a coverage or as great a drop off in the back area here. And again, I think this is suffering from a trim height issue. It's suffering from a steepness issue and possibly even some directivity leakage here that is causing this problem. All right, so let's compare them side by side. Here's adaptive over traditional. So right here we can see that there's a significant challenge here where we have this 10 dB negative delta from mix position to back of house. If we take a look at the different deltas from the back of the building, which is the residential areas and business areas back here, you can see that it's actually pretty equal here. Now, you know, it's only 2 dB of difference versus 10 dB of difference in the near field, but in the far field, you still get 6 dB of additional negative delta on the adaptive rig. So it actually performs really well here behind it. I mean, considerably well, right? So if we take a look at on the front side, similar situation here. Look, my goodness, look at the difference in delta here. Even though adaptive is covering all the way to the back seat, it has a 21 dB negative delta out into the backlands here. That is almost an order of magnitude better than the traditional array here. So, you know, this is something that could be really well suited for a gig like the Greek theater here, right? Now, of course, to be fair here, you know, the Greek has employed traditional conventional array for the delay system. So I thought it might be interesting to take a look at delay as well and see how it performs here. So here is the oh, wait a minute, I may have gotten out of track here. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to bring up this point. So again, with this coverage offset between the front of house position and the last seat, again, you can't just lose sight of this and pretend like it's not going to happen. You know, the guys that are on site with that traditional array are going to do something to try to improve that coverage if they have to do it this way. So The thing to take note of, obviously, is as they start to even out that coverage and then, use it at their show, these levels are going to creep up. These out of venue levels are going to creep up. It just goes hand in hand. As they creep up the levels and even them out in venue, it's going to impact levels outside the venue. All right. So now let's go take a look at some delay concepts. I think if you were going to impart delay system here, adaptive delay would be a really, really good choice here, and I'll make my case for it here. Obviously, you have real-time adjustable coverage. You're going to have less sightline intrusion, and it's going to allow for you to vary that coverage depending on conditions, right? So I've put in two AC6s here to look at. I've also put in a set of the new NT208L for the lawn coverage as a comparison here. And if we look at it side by side, you can see they actually match up pretty well. Now, again, I've volume matched this, and you can see we still get additional variance in that outside of venue area here, where you got the 85 dB compared to 88. It starts to level out a little bit as you get farther away. But the thing to keep in mind here is it depends on how you put this delay system in place, and I'll explain what I mean by that here. So here's some aesthetic look at it. This is one of the strong cases, I think, for using adaptive, something like AC6 in a delay system. I've gone to a seat that might be blocked off, given the height that we had it flown to cover the back area here. Gone to a seat where it was right in front of stage center, right, center stage, right where the performer would be playing. And as you can see, the conventional array is going to block a lot more sight line there. And you have to add to that, on that conventional array, you're probably going to have some sort of truss structure that is holding it in place. It's going to be fairly beefy, probably, compared to the adaptive array, which you could probably put on a pole, honestly. It's not that heavy, and it's very slim profile, and the structure that's holding it really would not be much bigger than the enclosures itself. So it would be very, very nice aesthetically to see that out there. So the adaptive advantages here are that the low trim height does not challenge the coverage possibility again, right? We can deal with low trim height. The audience coverage is not compromised by a shorter array. Precise start and stop coverage creates really steep drop-off in SPL. The directivity leakage, again, in the adaptive situation does not start until you get above 13 kilohertz, which will dissipate over time. And here's the interesting part, right? For primary and secondary deployment choices, meaning primary array and a delay system, you actually have some choices with the adaptive on how you actually decide to do it, right? For example, you could have a fully overlapped system, which is probably how the conventional array is going to work. You're going to cover as far up that hill as you can with the conventional array, and then you're going to lay on top of it the delay. You're going to try to get delay time that works for a big part of the audience over there, and lay it on top of it and add it with it, right? So it's working as one system there. But the thing that comes with that, of course, remember, is that's going to impact boundary SPL now. Now you've created something that's going to definitely impact those variances outside the boundary line. So you could do that as well with adaptive. You could say, okay, well, adaptive, I'm going to overlay that as well and create one system out of it. But you also have the ability with adaptive to create a transition there if you wanted to do it, where you could use the main array to primarily cover the Greek bowl, and then the delay array, excuse me, to primarily cover the lawn seating and create a transition there, excuse me. So as I was saying, you can create, with adaptive, you can create transition there where you don't have overlap and they don't necessarily add together to create more SPL off-site. You could have really good control over that lawn system now in terms of volume without dramatically impacting the coverage up there. All right, let's move on to the rooftop at Pier 17. Now, this is a venue I haven't mixed at, but I've been involved in with obviously working at EAW. We worked really, really closely with Anderson Audio, and Sam Burkow had a say in this as well. And this is a really, really unique situation here, and will challenge all you know and all you can do about noise abatement. So this is really unique. So this is the pier in New York. Now this is actually sitting on top of a building. This is actually the rooftop for a building. So open air rooftop stage. Definitely got some proximity challenges here. You have real dense population on the house left side of the PA or of the stage. You have less densely populated on the right side until you get at distance. Right at distance, you're going to have more people and buildings, etc., out there directly out from the stage. It's almost aiming directly at the Statue of Liberty, if I remember correctly. So you're going to have that whole situation out there to kind of deal with as well. So noise control here, precision control is kind of the whole game here. You're going to have broadband A, broadband C regulations. Here's that distant regulation I was talking about, where you're going to have even native kind of inversion layer. You're going to have built-in inversion layer that you're going to have to contend with as well. So the success of this, of doing a deployment here, is really dependent upon being able to do asymmetrical coverages that include the subwoofers. We're going to have to deal with inversion layer that is going to be in play almost all the time, etc. So this is going to be a tough one to deal with. So just to give you an idea of the distances we're talking about here from the stage, a couple thousand feet to the bridge, a couple of thousand feet out from the PA, and then a couple of thousand feet to the first tall structure from the stage here. And these are the predicted A and C weightings depending upon the PA system that we've put in. So you can see we get a really nice variance here. We got, what is that, 37-ish dB of roll-off of low frequency compared, in that area in the city there. That's going to be a really, really effective tool. We have really good drop-off of the broadband A stuff as well as we get out into the water where the inversion is, temperatures are going to be in place. So, we've done a really good job with this. So let me kind of show you what we've done here. So one of the things that was going to be a problem here and that we knew that we're going to have to contend with here is subwoofer coverage. And remember earlier I kind of mentioned a situation where cardioid can actually cause a problem for you. And they had that happen initially here, where there's a long line of subwoofers in front of the stage, and they just wanted to push them under the stage. They wanted to hide them under the stage. And what that actually created, because it was an open stage, is it created kind of a waveguide for all the off-axis audio in the cardioid and sent it flying right toward all the tall structures in the city. So obviously that was not going to work in that situation where cardioid was actually hindering you there a little bit. It was pushing audio out laterally underneath that stage. The stage was essentially working like a horn. So what it required is some asymmetrical coverage. So we did two things there, or the Anderson, I should say, did two things there. They pushed the subwoofers out in front of the stage, so you have a long line in front of the stage, and then you take advantage of the ability to manipulate audio behind and horizontally in the system. Obviously, you can do this natively with auto subwoofers. In auto, it's just a single cabinet that can do end fire, a single cabinet that can do cardioid, hypercardioid, etc. So it doesn't demand that you do these large, physically large end fire arrays to achieve a very similar, if not better, controlled result. And you can do it simply as a drop-down choice once you have these subwoofers in play. So here on the left, you can see with zero rejection goal, meaning we're not incorporating any rejection behind it, we're still getting pretty good drop-off. We're getting about 13 dB positive delta front to back. This is behind the stage, this is in front of the stage. So you still get a really good delta there with it. If you start incorporating rejection in it, then you can get really crazy with how much you have here. Obviously 23 dB of rejection at 100% rejection choice in auto. This is really amazing that you can pull that off. And you can adjust it at any time. It doesn't require physically removing, recalculating, getting distances and spacing changes to be able to create this kind of rejection. But the next part of the story was the asymmetry, right? We had this situation where we got the city on the bottom half of the display here and distant coverage out in the top half here. Well, with auto, you also have the ability to horizontally manage where your audio is going. You have a horizontal coverage component to it here. So we can create positive and negative coverage depending on what we do. So on the left here, you see where we have equal positive and negative coverage. It's creating a balanced subwoofer coverage in the venue, which also means it's balanced left to right. As you can see, it's 105 dB on the water side, 105 dB on the city side. But they really wanted to take advantage of this horizontal coverage capability to subtract sub-energy out of the city, right? Because it was going to travel for ages over there. So all you do is go to the software and impart some negative coverage that is not as far as the other, and some positive coverage, and narrow down this horizontal coverage of the entire array. And you can kind of see this here. We've created almost, well, not even almost, 11 dB of positive delta city side to water side here in the system. So this is very easily done. You can experiment with it, find out the best balance of delta that you can create to fit into your noise restriction, your SPL restriction, and still get done with your show, right? So let's take a look at it side by side here. It's pretty evident here. You can see the difference in shaping in that sub pattern here. So again, as I mentioned, they couldn't really live under the stage because of that, creating that waveguide of sub energy back up into the city. But once they moved it out, you could do this. And I've gone to see shows here, and I got to tell you, I mean, even when you're in the audience, you don't actually sense that this is going on. It feels like plenty of sub energy in the venue, etc. Yet we're able to reshape that energy and get it inside the noise regulation. Okay, so asymmetrical sub coverage above and beyond cardioid, hypercardioid. All right, so here's the other issue, though, that is in play, and that is this inversion layer issue here. So here is the pre-17 stage. Water in and of itself, especially with the temperatures that are in and around New York here, I put up some metrics here so that you can kind of read them and get a sense of it. But the gist of it is the water is always going to present cooler air than the air above it, right? So you're going to have this warm over cool inversion that happens there. And as a consequence, audio can travel for miles here. And I mean, it sound like it's right on your doorstep if you're not careful here. So my point of showing this and bringing it up is that there was going to be SPL regulation probably out on the other parts of the island here. And it was just absolutely going to demand that audio stay in the venue, right? It had to stay in the venue. So the great thing about adaptive in this situation is that we could put in a really long line. We could put in a long, long line and yet have the directivity to keep it in that very small audience area. So that helped with low frequency directivity and also kept high frequency and mid frequency off of the water and kept it from traveling over to different parts of the city here, right? So this, I mean, I feel pretty confident in saying there's only a couple of PAs in the world that might be able to address this and meet this SPL requirement and regulation in this setting. And adaptive is certainly one of those. It's done it very successfully for a few years now. All right, let's see here. So again, this is kind of what I was talking about with the broadband A, broadband C. You can see these distances and check out the precision of the start and stop in the broadband A, right? I mean, that is a huge differential there. It's almost 41 dB down by the time it gets to the water there. So really good stuff, really amazing. Chris and his team have done an amazing job there. Chris and Sam, everybody involved has done an amazing job with this place. All right, so let's just recap the advantages here. Again, precise start and stop coverage creates steeper drop off of SPL. Longer arrays could be deployed here, but they can be deployed without overshoot. They don't have to, they can put in a long line to get that low frequency directivity, but they also have enough precise control to be able to keep it in venue and not let it leak outside the boundary. This actually has the positive effect of increasing the headroom of the system for the audience because it's such a short audience geometry. So you have a gob of headroom in the PA system because of this. Right, remember, we're not having to readjust resources here. We're just using them all in a shorter space. Again, directivity leakage starts above 13 kilohertz. For those distance areas out there, any leakage at that frequency is going to get eaten up by the atmosphere, no question about it. And of course, end-fire and asymmetry was deployed for the auto subwoofers natively. There's no need to build any big deep fire end-fire arrays. There's no flown subs in place here, and it's covering the system or the venue perfectly. All right, so let's talk about this idea of battling temperature inversion here just a little bit. We'll kind of wrap up with this. And I kind of put this in here last minute. I was thinking, "Man, I really should talk about this because we actually have a tool with Adaptive to be able to kind of address some of the issues that happen with temperature inversion, right? So let's just have a quick review here. And it's important to remember, and you'll get to see some of my graphical skills here. This is going to be pretty awesome. So it's important to remember that when we're doing prediction on what our array is going to do in a space, that's generally done at a fixed temperature and humidity. We kind of do, the math is known math, as I say, we can kind of do that based on that. But it doesn't take into account necessarily temperature gradient, right, where we have a changing temperature, maybe vertically in the situation. So, when we build our predictions, we can create a start and stop. We can say, okay, when I get there on show day, this is what I'm going to do. We got nice even temperature and humidity there, and my array is going to do something like this. Like I said, there's no science involved here. This is just graphics to show you this concept here, all right? But the reality of it is, on an outdoor show, you are going to be on a hot day probably. And even if it's not a super hot day, the ground, because of the sun and the sunshine and the sun shining down on the ground, is going to heat the ground and the people that are down there. And it's going to create an inversion layer where warmer air is underneath cooler air, right? Doesn't have to be cold air, it just has to be cooler than the air above it. So when this happens, and if you guys have done outdoor shows, you know this intuitively. When you go to these shows and you're setting up your PA and you're listening to it, you put in your start and stop coverage and you go walk the venue, you think, man, what's going on at the back of the venue? Why am I not getting anything back here? It's like I don't have any amplitude, I got no frequency response back here, what's happening? Well, what's happening is this temperature inversion, right? And because cooler air, audio travels through cooler air slower than it does warmer air, right? So what it actually has a tendency to do is bend up as it gets closer to that cooler air and dissipate, right? So that's kind of what's happening here. It's kind of just bouncing off of this temperature here. It's kind of bending up toward the cool air. And what you're seeing here is not inaccurate to what is actually happening acoustically, right? So your coverage feels short. Even though you got coverage dictated out here, it feels short. Now, I will say this, I've made this mistake in my younger days, thinking that what we actually need to do here is extend the coverage, right? And that's not the answer. It's actually very counterintuitive in my mind, because extending the coverage just extends the bend out into the audience and farther. This is actually an angle of incidence problem, right? Where what we need to do is create steepness in the PA. In the perfect world, we might take that PA system and tilt it down a little bit to help with this problem. Obviously, with conventional array, and even with our array, the idea of actually doing that with any degree of precision is non-existent. I mean, we're not going to take a 16-box traditional array and at some point in the day pull it back, and at some point in the day let it back down, right? So, how do we combat this? Well, in Adaptive, we actually have the ability to combat this a little bit, where we can say, okay, well, for this part of the day, when this is going on, I'm actually going to shorten my coverage. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but that's the actual approach to dealing with this, right? Where we're going to create some steepness in angle in our coverage. We're going to change the angle of incidence to the audience area. And as you can notice here now, once we do that, then we get a little more coverage down in the people, and it's going to be better, right? It's going to feel a little better for them. But what happens at nighttime? Well, obviously at nighttime, this kind of reverses, right? We end up, the ground starts to cool as the sun goes down compared to the air above it. We get that temperature inversion where warmer air is above cooler air. And now we've got a situation where, man, audio is going to be traveling for a while. We're not going to have any problem getting back to the people in the back. I'm sure all of you have experienced this, where as the day kind of cools down, all of a sudden audio's traveling really well. It's because the air is warmer over the cool air where you're standing and mixing, right? So in this situation, obviously with Adaptive, we would just want to re-extend the coverage out to its normal position, and we can do this here, right? So that is one of the powerful things that Adaptive can do. We can do this with push-button preset in resolution software. So just to review, if we're optimizing for inversion layer, we're going to want to change our coverage. We want to change that angle of incidence and create a little more coverage down as we're doing it. That'll help us in this situation. As nighttime rolls in, then we want to put that coverage back. We can do that. And it's all done with presets. We can create presets in resolution that cover different, you can set it up for multiple times of the day, have it adjust. I know there are actually venues in the world, there are actually outdoor venues in the world. I think it's a racetrack that does this, where they have coverage for the stands that actually changes with time of day. The tilt changes with time of day to be able to keep coverage of audio on the people. And that is exactly what they're dealing with there. They're dealing with inversion layer as the track heats up, as the, all of the things that come along with that. All right, so let's look at some key takeaways from this. I was able to get this inside an hour, at least I'm there right now, so I'm excited about that. Let's take a look at the key takeaways today. So, directivity leakage impacts noise abatement. That's one of the key takeaways you should take away from this today. And adaptive PA has the least amount of leakage of anything that's out there today. Adaptive leakage doesn't start until it gets to 13 kilohertz. That is a function of our spacing and driver size and meeting line source criteria to be able to create a single acoustic source. So an array, a single cabinet, all of it is single acoustic source. Kind of regardless of how many you add vertically, it stays a single acoustic source and therefore doesn't create leakage until above 13 kilohertz. We can have really precise start and stop coverage. That is a reality. It is more so a reality. As I say, some line arrays are more line array than others. This is what I'm talking about a lot of times. We can be much more precise with our start and stop coverage. We can have flexible, near instant recall of directivity, and that is a significant advantage for setting up during your day. You just got to have the courage to push the button and change your coverage as needed. We can actually store them as presets in your resolution file. You can store them, recall them at any point. As I just outlined for you here, that can actually be a weapon for combating temperature inversion. So nice to have that tool in your box. And something we didn't talk about today, I just knew I wasn't going to have time to talk about it. Maybe I'll bait the hook for a future webinar here where we talk about spatial equalization. And that is available to adaptive arrays, where we create very intense start and stop, but we can also create zones of equalization within that. It's almost like the best of both worlds there, where you're working in line array, but you can still create equalization zones within that coverage. So again, maybe I'll bait the hook there a little bit. We'll talk about that in a future webinar. As I mentioned earlier, cardioid options are great. I don't want to dismiss them in any way, shape, or form, but in terms of noise abatement, they only help you in one direction and can cause actual problem in other directions if you're not really careful with how you deploy it. At the end of the day, as I've stated before, and this is one of your takeaways today for sure, superior control in front of the PA results in superior response behind it, right? They go hand in hand. Fix one on the front side, it's going to fix something in the back as well. Cardioid and hypercardioid responses, as well as asymmetrical horizontal coverage, is possible with auto subwoofers. So, on whole, adaptive gives you an awful lot of tools here to be able to get out and address noise abatement problems. So I encourage you to look into it deeper if you want to try it and get a sense of it. So here's the bottom line statement. You can screen grab this if you want. Adaptive's precision of control over the audience area produces superior noise abatement performance outside that same area without sacrificing coverage or system headroom. That sounds like a pretty juicy thing to have in your pocket if you're working on these noise abatement issues, okay? All right, as I said, you can get to the webinar re-recordings on the AAW site or the YouTube site. I'll also have a blog that goes along with this coming up shortly. It'll probably release sometime next week, I would think. And let's see, what do we got left here? Yep, there's the YouTube site. And that is it for the Adaptive Advantage today. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope that made sense to you. I hope we got the message through to you. We're going to open it up for Q&A here. Don't know how many people we had in the room today, but hopefully we got some questions. TJ and Jeff, are you out there?
Hi, Robert. Yeah, I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can, yeah. Good to go.
Awesome. Well, fantastic presentation. Yeah, deep dive into that. I feel like I learned a whole lot there. No questions from the people who were attending, but I don't think it can be overstated the power of real-time adjustments of the PA, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you have a conventional array, you set it up, you aim it, and you probably don't have a lot of time to go back and revisit that if something was even just a little off, right?
Well, you don't in conventional, for sure. I mean, without, lowering the thing and rechanging some angles, maybe you're rechanging, a coverage pattern on a given box, et cetera. That stuff is clunky to do in real world situations. And, I can tell you, the bigger the tour, it seems like the less time you have to deal with these sorts of things, right? Like these big productions that are rolling in, massive video walls, massive lighting systems. I mean, audio is not given a lot of time. You better have it right with traditional right out of the gate, because you aren't going to get second chances with it. Adaptive can give you a second chance. You can make a mistake in your prediction and actually be nimble enough to change that and get it right on site, let alone, adjusting against environmental conditions, So yeah, it's a tremendous tool to have at your disposal.
I was imagining someone with a conventional array frantically twisting NL4s trying to turn off the top box or something. It's about all you get, right? In the conventional sense.
Yeah, and it comes with the added irony of, when we're using point and shoot, even though we're creating J, right? We are creating collapse with it.
Yeah.
But if you're turning off boxes to turn off coverage, you're actually releasing the collapse. So yeah, you may be gaining some in terms of turning off boxes, but you're also releasing audio back out of that collapse a little bit as well. So, that's another dual-edged sort of, when we're in point and shoot with high frequency that isn't talked about very much,
Right. And another great point. I'm glad you pulled this out because I wasn't thinking about it. The noise mitigation complaints are almost always on base, right? So we tend to think, well, we're just really worried about low frequencies, but a dB is a dB. The measurement is not always being prejudiced against necessarily the frequency. So if we can reduce the amount of high frequencies leaking, we get more room essentially for the base. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting mindset, because I mean obviously low frequency is the thing we need to really control. I don't want to take anything away from that. That's usually the biggest culprit in any of the shows, especially with today's music styles. I mean, it's very low frequency impulse heavy. So, you need that, and you want to stay out of the surrounding neighborhoods if you can do it. So a lot of emphasis is put on low frequency control, and rightly so. But, when I think about it, I always think about it in the aggregate. It's like, well, okay, we've changed the amount of low frequency in the neighborhood now, so we can actually use more low frequency in venue. Right? But that actually has the added kind of thing of, as I add more low frequency profile to my mix, where I feel like I can turn it up, I might actually be hiding more A-weighted level. I might actually be disrupting the A-weight somewhere else off the property line now, because it doesn't feel like it's bright enough now, so let me brighten up the PA and get it more balanced. You kind of get into this push-pull thing. And you can really unravel it and get out of control with it very, very quickly, Yeah.
And then I love when we talk. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah. So I think if I want to get across anything to people in this, is that there's more to this than just cardioid subwoofers or even cardioid arrays. That only addresses one piece of the abatement. There is always going to be an abatement issue on the PA side, right? So that is where the precision in the pattern control and the directivity really, really needs to take place. And that's where adaptive is really, really superior to a lot of what we got going on out there.
And I love when we talk about the peer. That's a great case study. Jeff, I think we have 24 auto out there, right, to create that kind of coverage. Do you remember the arrangement? How are those set up in front of the stage?
Yeah, so the autos at the pier are 12 stacks of 2. They're spaced roughly an auto apart from each other, processed as one array in resolution. Like Robert said, they spent a lot of work up front to make sure that was controlled and meeting the goals outside the venue. I've been there several times, and I had forgotten how much asymmetric, kind of out to sea, if you will, the coverage was aimed. Just walking around the venue, you don't sense that there's poor coverage on one side versus the other. There's plenty of bass response in the venue, but clearly that's the type of thing where those 4 or 5, maybe 10 dB makes the difference between being in compliance and not.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I mean, I've been to shows there, and I'm going to be just dead honest about it here. I didn't realize the horizontal asymmetry was in place until I went and looked at their file. Until I went and examined their file here, and I thought, wow, look at this. At the venue, I had no idea what was going on.
And
Yeah, I knew
doing,
it was, and what walked it, and I'm like, it's pretty subtle. It's there, and then you look at the model. Nope, there's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And Resolution's doing all that for you, right? I mean, once you tell it where those loudspeakers are located, there's no math for you to do, right?
No, it's just really drop down choices for rejection, and then just enter in your positive and negative coverage profile that you want to enter in, and hit go. So I couldn't be more simple, really. I was, like I said, I was startled at it. I was like, wow, holy cow, they have it really asymmetrical here.
That's great. I don't know, Jeff, if you have anything else. Those are the notes I took, but fantastic presentation. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Audrey says there's a couple of questions in the Q&A if you want to address. Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to step on you there. I was just told that there are a couple of questions in the Q&A if we want to take a look at them.
I'm not seeing any questions there. I made a statement that said, please ask questions, but nobody took me up on it. So
I see a couple in there, TJ. They're actually in response to your post, which is great.
Here we go.
The first question I'll try to address. In regards to performance on a windy day, how does adaptive compare to traditional line arrays? So I'll take a stab at this one, and Robert, you can maybe jump in. The way I would characterize wind and generally how it's affecting audio is you're coming in with some different temperature air, and it's not necessarily the same inversion layer case, but you have a layer of air that's a different temperature than another. So the sensation is the sound's moving around is the sense we get. And it's a bit of a misconception that the sound is being moved because of the wind. The speed of sound is significantly greater than any wind you'd have in a venue type situation. We're talking the speed of sound is several hundred miles an hour, so it's going to go through it. But what happens is you create these areas where the sound will bend toward the cooler air a bit, go through the warmer air faster. What I would say the advantages of adaptive over conventional have a lot to do with some of the topics Robert has covered on the previous adaptive advantage webinars, where the source spacing really comes into play, that you start to hear what's going on in other parts of the coverage. So you hear more consistent change as you're more or less as that air comes in, you're hearing maybe a different part of the coverage. That is more different in a conventional system than it is with an adaptive system, primarily because of the source spacing and the control.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that, and it's hard to grasp this until you start to understand it, is that it's not the wind vector that is moving the audio. It's like you said, it's gradient, it's temperature change, and then audio accelerating toward the warmer and slowing down in the cooler air. So if you have this wind that is creating these gradients of different temperatures, all of a sudden speed of sound is changing, as it's coming to you. So yeah, I can really throw it off. But I will say this, and this has been my experience, that when you have something that's working as single acoustic source to begin with, on whole, it's less impacted by the wind. I hear less shift in it by the wind. So that's been my experience with it, using it outdoors. I've done a ton of outdoor shows with it over my time with it, and I was markedly surprised by it.
All right. Do you want to take that second question, Jeff?
Sure. So the second question here was, how would you use the extension feature on the array when it comes to optimizing the inversion layer? I tend to, um, in any situation, adjust as it makes sense. So if you have, like Robert showed, the coverage is maybe 300 feet. I wouldn't take it down to 150 right away. I would move it to 280. And then did that go the direction we wanted? Okay, it did. Okay, then do 260 to 240. So gradually till you get the place where you want to be. So get to your goal. And then once you've established that, you can then go back to those other points as you relax the coverage. So I'd suggest doing it gradually, rather than trying to do it in one big bit, particularly if an audience is present.
Yeah. Hey guys, while you guys were speaking, I kind of logged into one of my remote computers here and pulled up the resolution file for the pier if you want to look at it here. So this is the subwoofer and PA setup for the pier there.
That's good. While we're looking at that, Robert, you probably changed coverage once or twice during a live event. What can you say about its transparency to the audience?
Well, just kind of re-examining this over the past couple of years after I've come back into the folds of EAW, Jeff and I have actually done some comparisons with, modern conventional arrays in stadium environments, et cetera, looking at it. And I got to just be honest, I was startled at how much more comprehensive the adaptive product was for the ground coverage in the stadium. Like the front to back seat of people sitting on the floor. It was breathtaking how much better that coverage predicts out with adaptive compared to traditional. It was kind of mind-blowing. I mean, I've been kind of on this, tear talking about delay systems and how, delay systems in that environment would be much better off being adaptive and being able to cover the proper piece of the geometry in the stadium and create a relevant delay time for a bigger number of seats. But man, I was really startled about how good the ground coverage was from a PA that's hanging, at a 40 or 50 foot trim. It really got me thinking about it. I got to be honest.
Have you ever had to change coverage during a live event, though?
Sure. Yeah.
And how transparent was that to the audience?
Oh, you mean so while audio's running?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, unless it's going to happen, I don't think you would hear it, Like if you push the button and you're listening, you can kind of hear this little zip, and then it's done. There's just nothing to it. An audience member would never pick it up, I don't think. So.
Jan Peterson says that they can confirm that asymmetric subdispersion is possible with just 4 auto per side. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, that whole horizontal piece of autos is actually a great tool to combat, power alley, right? If we have split stacks and we have this summation that's happening in it, you can just take each one of those stacks and start to horizontally move it out until that energy evens out a little bit in the center. So, even though you're going to have offset of time there, you're going to have that typical comb filtering that is going to happen there, you can get away from that power alley piece of it and make it less apparent. It's actually a really powerful tool to have at your disposal. Just got to take the time to do it and make it happen,
Very good. Rob's asking, what do we have anything new coming? I think it's ironic because we're about 12 minutes late to a resolution roadmap meeting as we speak. But this is good. This is good. Jeff, maybe is there anything just on the cusp here that you could share, directions we might be going?
Yes, we're always looking at new things for resolution, for further control. I think one area we're examining more and more is the ability to improve the prediction. So, for example, we're going to be having the ability to have better shadowing so that you can actually see what impact your surfaces might have in your venue, and I can see that type of thing expanding potentially to be able to predict some of these situations better as well that we've been talking about today. So that's certainly an area that we're continuing to invest in for resolution.
Yeah, it's kind of I'll take this moment to kind of interject this. I think it's important to have this distinction, and I, this kind of got driven home to me on all those years on Tom Petty where I was doing adaptive demonstrations in the venue, and it's important to understand this kind of distinction between prediction software and control software. Yes, resolution is a prediction software, but it is also the control software, meaning whatever you see is what it's going to make the PA do. And those two things are very tightly aligned. So as you make adjustments in your prediction, it's actually going to do that adjustment in the PA for you. It's, it disconnects you from one step of it in a traditional where you can make a prediction, go do it, adjust the prediction, and now go have to physically do it to get it to happen, right? With this capability with the resolution, you do it almost instantly. It's just an incredible tool to have at your disposal there.
Good. We do have another question slightly outside of the topic today, but applicable from the perspective of presets. Someone's asking if there is third-party control of adaptive through systems like QSys. The answer is yes. We can interface with third-party systems. We have a plugin for QSys now, QSys Core, that will allow you to recall presets and monitor system health. I'm not quite sure if it allows you to turn the system on or off. That, Jeff, you may know better than me, but yes, there is third-party control, and you can recall presets through it.
Yes, yes. We do, the way that functions is it's basically an API that's running on the loudspeakers, and QSys interfaces with it directly, so you don't need to have a computer running resolution, for example. How we've seen people turn the system off and on have either been control over their breakers or means at the building level type control to do that. A challenge is turning it off and on. We don't have the ability to stay awake from an off state. So that's if we ever get that ability from resolution, we could add it via QSys as well.
Nice.
Very good. I think that's all we have at the moment, and we're 15 minutes over. So I think with that, Robert, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I'll just say thanks again for attending. Thanks again for the great questions. Part of my role here at EAW is to get out into the world and demystify this thing for the public and everybody understand what it is. And I have an expressed goal, whether it's internal or external, of getting this PA recognized back into concert sound. The installers and the contractors of the world totally get this. I mean, we've seen this with some incredible installs in places like Michigan Stadium and Sun Devil Stadium. I mean, all of these incredible stadium installs. Michigan Stadium's an interesting one. I hope I'm not talking out of school here. I got Jamie Anderson was out with our guys doing some tuning on that system here recently, and emailed me afterwards going, "What an incredible experience tuning that system." He said the coverage was so even on it, I felt like I could sit in any seat and actually tune the system from there. So that was unsolicited from Jamie, and I know he meant it in his heart to reach out to me like that. He would not normally reach out for something like that. So the idea is to get this back into concert sound and have people experiencing it there as well. So thank you for coming. We'll see you at the next Adaptive Advantage webinar. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later.